thanks, Joe, for jumping on to this quick little Zoom call.
I had no choice. You guys made me.
And I think we're all in agreement that we just wanted to give a little bit more context and background to this awesome collaboration that we are doing across the month of May, but mostly into June, called Get Better Together. What we've already experienced with some of the people we're talking to on our coast is that there's a little bit of a disconnect in what self-tape May is. If you will, maybe let's spool up our audience on what self-tape May is, how long it's been around, that sort of thing.
Well, I'm so excited that people are learning about it because it really has become very popular in the last couple of years. It's the brainchild of a woman named Audrey Moore, who some of you may follow podcasts. You may be aware of her podcast in particular called Audrey Helps Actors. And so I think she created this challenge called Self-Tape May, which is basically an opportunity originally to practice self-tapes separate from auditions. So rather than waiting for the opportunities, it's creating the opportunities. So it started with like, let me record these. Hopefully, I think the intention was, let me get better by practicing. And then I think the idea is that people became aware of it when we were all home together for those few years. Remember when 3 weeks turned into a couple of years and we were all home a lot? I think that the idea was maybe we can get some outside eyeballs and earballs and feedback on these tapes by sharing them on social media. And then casting directors started helping by weighing in and offering some feedback, encouraging words. And it's become a little more formalized where now some casting directors and other industry players will watch them and help amplify certain people's tapes as an example of excellence, of people that are working at their craft. And so there's this collective movement of let's practice during this month, and let's practice getting better by doing. Getting more reps in is a great idea. You know, there's that whole rule about 10,000 hours, like it takes 10,000 hours to become masterful at something. Well, I got to tell you, if I practiced my self-tapes the way that I sometimes make a sandwich when I'm in a hurry, I'm not going to be getting better. I'm actually just practicing a bad habit, rushing.
The analogy I was thinking of was a gym, which is if you've already put your 10,000 hours in and you understand and you've mastered all of that equipment, all of the free weights, then yeah, more reps can be very helpful. You might even be able to self-direct your own program. But I think a lot of actors are, in this analogy, they're walking into that gym, or they've been to the gym a few times, but they've still never enlisted the help of someone who's been there and done it and can give you a more efficient way, like you're saying, to do it without hurting yourself, but also to optimize that growth and that performance.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I think, so this is a workout for a month. And you're right, we can strain, we can hurt ourselves, we can do things that cause imbalance in our muscle groups. I once saw a weird German arm wrestler who had a huge one bicep and the other one was the same normal size. It's kind of odd. Like that can happen if we work out one muscle group and not the other. So don't become a weird German arm wrestler during May. Like
unless that's your calling.
Unless that's your jam.
Yeah.
So I think the invitation is, well, what is it that allows us to get better? And is that something we can do as a community? And y'all are get taped, right? Sorry, Brooke, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I was going to say, and I think that that's our goal, is to help people to get better, but not at just one aspect of self-tape, like the whole spectrum of what it takes to have a good self-tape, lighting, sound, your authenticity, your mindset, everything that goes into it, technical aspects of the camera and or compression, and making sure that you are staying on your game through some of these slower months. So that's, I think, why Audrey picked May to be, a great month to kind of continue the work as opposed to just putting it on the shelf to get dusty.
This almost feels like winter, like we come through the busiest season of the spring, the February, March, April. And then the idea is like, well, what am I using this period of time for before the fall? And so it's a real great opportunity to reflect on my setup, on my reps, on how it's going. And so this idea of reflection and being able to watch tapes back, really getting to break them down, to use them as a means to get better, isn't for everyone. Not everyone, some people say they want to get better, but I've noticed that not everyone has a practice around it. And so the idea is like, if you've been saying, I want to get better, great. If you've been saying you want to get better and you're doing it as part of the online community, awesome. We'll see you out there. And if similar to like feeling a little nervous at the gym, or like I've been used to having people be there with me and I would like a little feedback and guidance just every once in a while, that's what this is for. This idea is that we can sort of frame up what our goals might be for ourselves, because that's different than somebody else just telling us what to do, right? Setting our own intentions and goals of what we're working on. This seems to be the difference between people that, you know, do good work and people that have a generative self-interest in improvement over time. And so if we know what we're working on down to the T, and if we have the ability to do that and stack those gains, you know, it's the consistency part and the reflection part that we're excited to help facilitate with and for the people that might be watching this and might be joining us.
First of all, we're going to do a kickoff event as the first Zoom call of 6 total Zoom calls at the beginning of Self-Tape May. And in your mind, Joe, why don't you tell the folks at home listening and watching what it is we want to do with that kickoff event, other than to just look at their faces for the first time.
Yeah, nice to see faces. I think be super intentional. And I think the super intentionality is, what are we doing as individuals? Do we know? And if we haven't thought about it, it's an opportunity to get more specific. You might hear from other people what their options are, and that might say, oh, actually, I want to swap mine out. That sounds like something I need to work on, because I hadn't even thought about that, or I sort of had a sense of that. And then I think the idea is, as a group, what are we scanning for? And the more specific and intentional we can be before any opportunity, whether it's one tape, one take, 1 month, then the reflective process afterwards is also going to be able to be more specific. Like, how did it go? The thing you set out to do, how did that go? And then how do we adjust along the way? Because like you said, we're going to have this kickoff call. It's an opportunity to get to know each other, to hear from each other, to be more specific, and then to go off and do this lonely work where we're kind of working in isolation. We'll do a check-in, I think, during that month of May. We're about midpoint. How's it going? What else can we tweak and refine? So like, if you've been at the gym now for 2 weeks and you have a trainer come over and just make sure you like lift up a little bit or just correct a little bit, you know, and adjust your alignment. And then I think the opportunity in June is to really get into, how did it go? How did what I set out to do play out for me? Because, you know, from our work around mindset, we might think we're doing great, and then we might watch it back and go, I didn't know I was doing that thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, something interesting about that is, outside of this type of practice, whether you've done Self-Tape May before or not, actors are, in some respects, reactive creatures, not just because acting is reacting, but because we're waiting for the opportunities, we're waiting for the audition, we're waiting for the self-tape request. And then we, of course, are hoping and wishing for feedback, and we rarely to never get that feedback. And so this is an interesting sort of call to action to actors, whether you just do the Audrey part of things and go to the gym on your own, or whether you take the invitation to join us and have the coaches there to not only give you the pep talk at the beginning and help you set those goals and get intentional, but then to hold you accountable and then to do the review at the end. It's a different way of approaching your craft, where now you're getting proactive, you're setting goals, whereas normally you're waiting for that stuff to come to you. And it will hopefully awaken some new ideas, some new skills. One of the things we're very interested in on our side of things with Get Taped and our Sam Christensen process that we facilitate is even castability. Because it's one thing when your agent and casting agree on a role and you get it into your inbox, but what happens in Self-Tape May when you have complete freedom and ownership to pick the sides that you're going to work on? That becomes an interesting exercise that we're very fascinated in, which is, you know, are you a Don Knotts type, and yet you picked the monologue from A Few Good Men of You Can't Handle the Truth? Okay, that's an interesting choice. Let's talk about why you chose that and wanted to work on that monologue. And it might be for really legitimate good reasons, or there might be something to uncover there in terms of your view of your own castability in certain roles. And So it's an interesting way of approaching your craft from a more proactive standpoint, as opposed to being reactive to only the things that hit your inbox.
I love that. So I'm hearing proactivity, authenticity to you, and how that relates to castability. And I also think, this idea of our collaborative skill sets coming together is something that I'm really intrigued by, because y'all see people on a daily basis through the lens where you're trying to help them achieve the goal of the outcome of the 15, 20, 40, 60 minutes. And similarly, in my coaching, it's so much different than if I'm prepping someone for an audition. If I'm long-term coach teaching them, I get to say things to them which allow them to get better over time instead of just hit the target for that short window. And so what I'm really excited about is this idea of Sam Christensen's focus around how we are seeing ourselves in and amongst the industry, and the idea of how on a daily basis, everything you learned running a studio and that you take on the road with you when you both travel, how that applies to our self-tape setups. And the idea of how does that dovetail with the mindset of framing up before, during, and after, the tools that we have when managing working outside of our comfort zone and seeing ourselves differently. I think the synergy of our collective brain power and experience is something I'm really excited to learn from and share with our fellow travelers.
And I also think it is helpful to uncover what's possible. I think a lot of times actors feel like they're limited when they're getting all of these instructions from casting directors, and they have fear going into the taping experience, as opposed to the freedom and the possibilities. We get to see actors tape all day long. So I think that there's a lot of choices that actors make under the guise of fear. And one of the things that Sam implemented in all of his work prior to passing, and that we've taken the mantle for, is to dispel fear. And Joe, I think that that's a huge foundation of what you do as well.
I really think that this concept of an off season makes so much sense to people that play sports, that are athletes. If we look at the landscape right now of the fact that things may be slower for some people, things may be pausing while negotiations happen, that multiple unions are using this time to advocate their value, and things are going to pause. Well, let's flash forward now to 3 months from now. Where do you want to be at that moment? Do you want to be catching up like, oh, wait, the industry's back?
Yeah.
Do you want to be coming from a place of nonstop panic mentally because you don't feel ready because you've been out of practice? Then what better opportunity to be in collaborative process and be able to use this time together? And then if you want to, you can continue using the tools and breakdown that we do during May, June, in July, August, to look back at old tapes and learn from those. This is like a evergreen skill set.
So I would love to discuss talking about specificity, the specific aspects of what in June we will be doing with participants on the Zoom.
Because presumably the actors will have done anywhere from hopefully more than 0 self-tapes. Otherwise, there's not much to scan for or reflect on. I know Audrey sets the goal, if you're just doing self-tape May, for her, she does some contests associated with that. You have to do 16 of them in the course of May to qualify for her, her drawings and stuff like that.
First of all, in terms of logistics, whether you do 0 tapes during self-tape May and you're coming just for the snacks, which you'll be providing because we don't provide snacks, and you're like sort of pulling from an old arsenal of tapes you've done over time, that's an option. If you're participating and you do more than 0, let's use that tape. And if you go 16 plus, like that also works. So there's a spectrum of opportunity. So what will happen is we're going to select material, meaning a tape, from some period of time that we're going to break down. And we're going to be looking and scanning for specific things that we notice technically, things we notice about things collectively, casting and series, directors of series, producing directors, showrunners, people that watch tapes back, our collaborative partners, what they scan for. We're going to have a checklist of things that we're going to be looking at, and we're going to work sometimes on our own and sometimes together as a group. So by the end, you feel empowered to be able to look at your next tape and know what to do, much like somebody going to the gym, and instead of going, I need a trainer, I actually know my way around a little bit. and I won't harm myself. I'll actually empower myself.
Sometimes we learn so much from watching someone else go through that critique. So I think the collaborative nature of just being in those sessions, those Zoom sessions together and watching others get feedback is going to be of great use to everyone on the call.
And I think even going further, sometimes it's just nice to know that there are other people out there doing the same thing that you are. I do think that it's surprising when you see other people's setups and you're like, oh, I think I could do that. But you didn't know you didn't know that was possible.
Possibilities. There's something about the spirit of everyone getting better together and like what that vibe feels like. There's a collective energy that builds.
All three of us are so interested in dispelling fear in actors. It is one of the most pervasive things that plagues actors is that fear-based mentality or coming from a sense of lack. And I think self-tapes in general and how they've become ubiquitous in the last few years has created some pain points for actors that if actors are really honest with themselves is based on this feeling of I don't have enough resources, I don't know how to do it, I'm not getting the feedback in the room. And so we're going to present an environment, regardless of how much experience you have, regardless of how many tapes you end up completing, where we're of course going to be very encouraging, but in a way that helps you really scan for some of the stuff. And like Joe said, to get better. We want you to feel more empowered to be able to do that, to go to the gym. And even though there's no coaches there that day, to feel like you can do that self-directed workout and still achieve something, still forward that progress in yourself.
And it also seems like this idea of working in isolation can feel like punishment. Every working environment has challenges. And we think growth and getting better is only possible by a combination of both support and challenge. So for now, we can maybe the training wheels of support and shine a light on that so that you can take over the job. And so you can be supporting yourself and affirming what is working specifically so that you can be challenging yourself and getting better over time, way beyond the time that we're going to spend in this room, this Zoom room.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, hopefully this has inspired you to either click on a registration button or to reach out and ask us more questions, because we would love to have you on this journey with us.
Absolutely. And wherever we're finding you, like we're sending you good mojo, and we're all in this together.